Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I am the author of 11 books. I am a CEO of 12 years. I am the founder of a startup set on data privacy. I am an elite performance coach of over 18 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. I am, though, most importantly, and I guess most specifically, the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance and behind the landmark findings, a world first to uncover, with obviously data and science on our side, how to develop a top 10 ranking. It is so exciting, phenomenal, astounding, amazing. As a former athlete, player, I never thought this was possible, and being the one behind the work, it is so incredibly rewarding and humbling to be able to share, I guess, the specifics, the keys behind it, and that really is what Beyond Top 10 Tennis is all about. My work also dives into mitigating injuries throughout, I guess, that pathway towards that top 10 ranking, as well as looking at different segues, transitions through to what you really need to develop those optimal performance outcomes. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, the V by Dr. B, to the rule of transference, having coined terms from the barrier breaker to the golden rule. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of work, but again, that's why we're here. Each episode, we've been diving into and unpacking one of these texts. Specifically, we've been focusing on the secrets to optimal performance success and just picking out one of those key segments and sharing additional insights. And I've really been enjoying myself, and I hope you have too if you've been following along. And I think also, if you have been from the beginning, thank you so much. And also for the feedback, please keep it coming. Today's episode, it's just so important. And I think, as in all episodes, they're all cross-sectional to just applicable to our day-to-day lives, whether we are that player, athlete, the coach, or the parent in that equation, in that, I guess, that triangular dynamic we talk about. And I mean, buckle up, get ready, and I really hope today's episode has just some really good key insights and values that you can really start taking home and considering, and just take up that next level while integrating them into your training load and schedules. Today's episode is on balance. Remember to take time for your non-sporting self. And if you'd like to follow along, we're on page 90. And I guess also, as was hinted at in the intro, and how it can be implemented into your own training loads, to practices, to life, it's so simple, but it's so important and also so often overlooked. And look, before we really dive into the chapter, I think the title has so much to offer in the most simplistic way. And it's something that just so often overlooked, whether you are that coach or the parent or the player athlete yourself. And essentially that is that the often mistake made is that your entire identity is as that player or athlete. And also for the parent with that child that is the player or athlete or athlete, to be mindful of this. Likewise with the coach. And it's also common practice for the coach to fall into this trap as well. Obviously not as frequent as, I guess, the player athlete. And essentially that's because if you're that 8, 9, 10-year-old and your sport of choice, and let's use tennis here, and it essentially is growing up with you. You're evolving as that individual, that human, because again, that humanized approach that we like taking here. And tennis is with you each and every step of the way. It's in your day-to-day life, your routines, it's in your goals, or your planning. Almost every single thought corresponds and correlates with that ultimate end goal. Now, on one hand, it can be that's phenomenal. On one hand. So let's not be mistaken here. On the other hand, if our entire identity is encompassed within our sporting self, that is where a lot of, I think, personal and also professional issues long-term really start to be rooted. And it's so important that when we're building these foundations and setting ourselves up for success to implement optimal performance practices, and I think that end game, to really start to integrate this in the healthiest way possible, which essentially means having that healthy dynamic, but also that divide there, whereas that there is that one part of your identity that is that player and or athlete, whichever you identify as. And then there still is that other self, that is when you're not training, that there's you, that individual, whether you're at school, interacting with your friends, etc., and your family. It's not just about, life is not just about your sport of choice. And I also say this from a very, I think, personal perspective as well, because unfortunately, this was a mistake that was made when I was growing up and when I was training and playing. My entire life, up until a point, was dedicated towards achieving, I guess, that number one world ranking. And my sights were set on it, and my sights were actually set on the Golden Slam, not just the Grand Slam, which is all 4 slams in the calendar year. I just faintly remember it was Steffi Graf that won the Golden Slam. Please correct me if I'm wrong, which essentially is the gold medal at the Olympics plus all 4 Grand Slams. And I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot think of anything more awesome. Essentially, even though injuries derailed me in my late teen years, up until that point, that was where my mindset was, and my entire identity, not just part, my entire identity. Because back then, there was no knowledge around those foundations. It's either some players, they had a separate identity and others didn't. It was never, ever something discussed between coaches, players, parents, whatsoever. And unfortunately, even though, coming from that, the experience and understanding those, I guess, that dynamic and the different perspectives and everything that interplays within that, I guess, that identification maze to framework, it's so important now more than ever to be conscious of that. And unfortunately, the same mistakes continue, which means there is such limited dialogue to discussions around, I guess, this not only the individualization, but separating your identity to not just your sporting self. And this is what happens when an athlete is forced out of their sport because of an injury. They do not know who they are. They do not know who they identify as, because their whole life up until a point in time is that sport. So they are that player or they are that athlete, and they do not know who they are without that. And if you're listening, either you relate 100%, you've been there, you are there right now, you get it, or you haven't whatsoever and you think, I don't know what you're talking about. But let me tell you, this is 100% real. Science, data on the side, okay? And it's just so important because it's actually quite a serious topic to digest, but be so mindful of. And look, we've had a previous episodes on the mindfulness to even depression and anxiety and mental health episodes. And it really is all encompassed here as well, is that if that healthy space is not made for you as a person away from your sport, you are essentially being set up for, or setting yourself up for, going down one of those avenues. And it's not essentially like an athlete's or player's fault. No, it's far from it. It's those responsible. So it's the coaches and the parents that really need to be mindful of this to safeguard, their child and or player or athlete, to just set them up with the best intentions for the next 10 years and onwards. Because if you are that 18-year-old and you held onto that goal since, for 10 years, since you were 8, and then you are derailed with that injury and you are sidelined, who are you? What is your purpose? What is the other side of you that you enjoy outside of play, or outside of those games, practices, events, etc.? And it's there. Trust me. If you're struggling, it's there. And please, for the parents, coaches out there, please spend the time finding out what that is for that player and or athlete. Help them figure it out, because if things do not go their way, whether it is an injury that sidelines them, it could just be a life event, it could just be a phase, it doesn't matter, irrespective of what happens at any given moment in time, there is more to sport. And I wish someone told me that when I was that teenager or that early adolescent, to be better prepared, because the struggle that I went down, because I tell you what, that struggle is real. It was that an entire identity crisis almost, because it's akin to your heart being ripped out of your chest when something you love so much is taken away from you, and not by choice. And there is such a lack of education around this and awareness. And I am, to the best of my knowledge, it's not even in the coach education frameworks whatsoever. Sure, you know what? These are the athletes or players who end up in their psychologist's office coping with this and dealing with this, opposed to, in previous episodes, being mindful, implementing those practices in their day-to-day lives to better set themselves up for success, whether on or off the court. It is so crucial. And that is why I think the secrets to optimal performance success, it is so simple but so important, with such deeper insights rooted between the pages, that it really tells the tale of there's so much more. And if you are, that 19, 20, 21-year-old, or even that 25-year-old, 29-year-old, it doesn't matter. And you need to walk away from your sport, whether by choice or not. The work, hopefully, has been done to better prepare you. But what happens when that work is not done? It doesn't matter if you are 15 and stop, or 20, 25, 30, 35 and stop. Obviously, when you are older, you are more equipped with those skills to deal with it. Though it's so commonly overlooked, and there's such a broad misconception around this, and the important role of identity and how there is that attachment to that sport. And on one side, hey, it's wonderful, incredibly healthy. It's great. And having that dogged determination to get towards that end goal, that top 10 ranking, put in those arduous hours and that day in, day out, because at the end of the day, you're only doing it because your heart just thrives in it. And that is really what just defines that player athlete mentality, you are prepared to put in the work each and every day because you are working towards that end goal. And in this case, that top 10 ranking, being a professional. And if you're listening, there's a very good chance that you either are one or you've been one. So you understand that, or you know one, you're working with one, your child is one. And so you understand that level of commitment that is required, and there is no such thing as months off. And if you get injured, there is still no such thing as months off. You're still obviously actively working towards something in one way, shape or form. Though on the flip side, your identity about there is so much more to each and every athlete player out there than just their performance of their sport. It could be their performance in other aspects of their life. And it's so fundamental, again, bringing it back to balance. When, balance has different connotations, and we talk about that as well. But in this instance, it's balancing what life has in front of you, what's on the table there. What are those interests? And you see an incredibly large number of professional players that divvy up those interests from, they are that player, they are that athlete, but you know what? On their days off, maybe they really enjoy photography. Maybe also on the side, they're also doing their undergraduate degree. Maybe they're doing their master's. There have actually been some professional players who've gone on to their PhD. Wonderful. But that's not the case. There are professional athletes out there that also do other, because there's so much more than just their sport. And the sooner the player athlete is made conscious of this, and the coach and parent is on board to share that with them, it's so empowering for that player and athlete to say, hey, I know this is your life right now, but let's make sure it's not your whole life. And what we mean by that is to make sure you are allowing time for other elements that you enjoy. Whether it's you absolutely love science, you absolutely, again, you love being creative. Whatever it is that just excites you away from the court, to be able to nurture that as well, opposed to just purely your sporting performance and endeavors, etc. And when you're able to have that alternative or that other, and something actually does happen that prevents you from doing, obviously, what you love in that sporting domain, it's so much easier for the player or athlete to almost distract themselves in the best possible way by feeding into this. And it's when we're able to implement this into our framework, when we're developing those optimal performance outcomes, we're setting ourselves up not just for optimal performances, I think, physically, but also when we're considering the emotional and mental side of that player athlete and the stability there and the longevity and the coping mechanisms and everything, I think, encompassed under that and integrated into that playing life cycle, and that it's not just the performance metrics. There is so much more that we need to be mindful of if we're looking at developing the whole athlete. And by developing the whole athlete, that not only means we are looking after the individual long term, but we're setting them up for success irrespective of their professional endeavors, that top 10 ranking, but also when they decide to turn that new leaf. Or if it's not by choice, something does happen, they may develop an injury and be sidelined for a period of time, that they still are conscious of their other options, their other passions that they have in life that they enjoy and they're able to turn to. That was a very long discussion there, and such important insights just to really latch onto the term of balance in this respect. And it's a key fundamental when you're developing that athlete or player, especially for the long term. But when we're looking at this and discussing the differentiators that really make the difference when we're developing that player athlete for the long game and the pathway. All right, so why we're all here we go. As a dedicated athlete, it is hard not to devolve every waking hour to your sport of choice. After all, this sport brings out your best. It puts the smile on your face every single day. It makes you feel more alive, gives you direction, becomes a part of you, an extension of who you are and who you are becoming in any case. Your sport is your passion. And look, this essentially touches on everything we've gone over. Not only just that balanced perspective, but it really feeds into that drive, that desire, that determination, just that love you have for your sport, and it makes each and every waking hour worth it. And again, I share this from experience and having those such powerful goals, working towards them each and every day, but also being sidelined with those injuries and not being taught back then about identity and that other self, is that your whole self is not defined by the athlete. Your whole self is not defined by your results. And it's such a staggering number of especially adolescents to teens, even professional like active players in their 20s that fall into the trap of valuing their self-worth to just their identity in itself through to those outcomes, to their performances, the results, the end goals. If they do not hit where they want to go, then they think they are not good enough. And that crosses over to each little aspect of their life. And it is an incredibly unhealthy spiral. But at the end of the day, it's actually not their fault. It's how they've been conditioned and trained and what they are essentially conscious of. And a lot of athletes and players are taught, unfortunately, to value themselves towards or against those end objectives, which essentially are those results, which means if they lose, then they're no good. If they win, they're phenomenal. If they lose, they're no good. And it goes over and over, and it's a cycle that continues. And it really is up to the coaches and the parents and I guess your support network to better inform you, but also I think for the player and athlete yourself to really tune in here, to listen, I think, so consciously with that level of awareness to be able to differentiate who you are as a person, who you are as an athlete player, and who you are in other aspects of your life. And that your sporting identity is not your whole identity. Okay, so you might not feel all of these emotions yet, but during the developmental stage is where it will take off. It is going to, and it will continue to foster and flourish thereafter. This is what contributes to the building blocks, the foundations of elite athletes. Not all athletes who experience these emotions make these ranks. Unfortunately, there is more than emotion that contributes to world-class performances. And this is so important because at the end of the day, we all have emotions, of course, though not all of them are going to equate with those outcomes that we want. So there's some of us that will be derailed. At the end of the day, if you're listening with the aspiration to following the pathway, following the long game, becoming that top 10 player, and that's at least a minimum, we're looking at that 10-year pathway, how many of you are going to stay the course? How many of you out there are going to stay the course for 10 years, day in, day out, putting in that work, obviously being mindful of that identity and the role of balance? And look, it's okay because goals change, objectives change, and that is what it means to be human. Again, that humanized approach, we're all individuals. You are your own person, your own individual, carving out your own identity, which is incredibly powerful and empowering in itself. But it goes to say that irrespective of those emotions, desires, and passions that are there for your sport, it could change, and that's okay. Though it's also being equipped on how to manage that, how to better control and grasp that and understand that before or as you go on to embark that next chapter of your life. And it could happen sooner than you plan, i.e. that, the developing that injury, unfortunately, or just through circumstances. Or it could be financial, not being able to travel to the events you need. Or it could be you have these incredible sponsors, and then unfortunately something could happen, one drops, and it means you need to miss something. It comes down to a whole number of things that they're so, discreet and individual to each person that it's even more important to be mindful of that these things can happen, and that's okay. I'm going to do the best I can with what I can control, and by leading a balanced lifestyle, having a balanced approach to my training, my playing, my performances, those outcomes, better prepares me for, look, I might step away from my sport in 20 years. I might step away from my sport in 10 years. It could be 5 years, opposed to being sidelined without an afterthought and then not being conscious of what's next or who you are in that, that moment in time without that player and or athlete identity. And this is so important. You are a player, you are that athlete, and you get to be that player and or athlete your entire life. No one gets to take that away from you. And I say that with an open heart and a whole heart because I cannot tell you how often it was tried to be taken away from me, where I was told, no, I am not. So much so to the point that I started distance running, ultra running even. That's right, those 100-kilometer events, because I just could not fathom the thought of not being that athlete. And to a lot of the athletes out there who have, moved on from their professional endeavors, there's a lot of us out there that are the same. We struggle to let go of that identity, and we find that meaning and or purpose in different, pursuits, and a lot of the time sporting pursuits. And for me, at a young age, I fell into running. And that's, again, a whole other story. But it was so fulfilling to be able to identify as an athlete in that way, shape, or form when I was no longer at that point in time, in my eyes, unfortunately, able to identify as that player athlete. Though it's more so saying that through experiences we learn, and no one can take that away from you. And please learn it from me, and because I learned that the hard way. And now obviously it's so much more enlightening and empowering with the data and the science and all the work that's been undertaken over the last 20 years. It's been incredibly rewarding, and why I'm able to be here today right now beyond Top 10 Tennis and talk about top 10 rankings and how we can really get there. And probably a significant part of my work has been around mitigating injuries, because yes, I was that injured athlete. That was me. And my dreams, my passions were taken away from me preemptively because of poor technique, poor conditioning, poor roadmaps, poor pathways, without that data and science to support, each and every step of the way. And that's obviously what AIMA International is all about. Here we go. However, these emotions and the utmost passion for your sport are significant contributing factors, so much so that elite athletes would not be in their fortunate positions if they did not hold their sport in the highest regard. A reminder that this devotion and passion held by the elite has contributed to where they are today. And I think it's just so important to finish on that in the best possible way, because that's really where we started, about the passion, the devotion, that dedication there. And it's really just embedded into each and every player and athlete out there. And you, obviously, if you're listening and you are that player athlete, you know what I'm talking about. Or, if you're that parent or coach who have been there, you know what it's about. And that's even why it's so important, integral to just be conscious of balance and to be able to know the identity or the identification matrix. In this case, it can be very complex and convoluted, and you can control that. You can help that player and athlete shape that, because again, we're looking at that entire, sporting spectrum, and that player athlete falls in there somewhere, and it doesn't matter where in this respect, but it's about showing them that whilst this is one element of your life, it is not your whole life. And if we can raise our athletes and players within, this matrix, being mindful of this, for lack of better wording, this level of mindfulness and conscientiousness, or level of consciousness, and the intent, and again, what our previous episodes have really touched on, it really builds that foundation just so much more robust and well-rounded to encompass and embody the whole athlete. It encompasses the individual. It has space for the humanized approach. We are making it intentionally that it's not just that player-athlete mentality. It's also the individual. It's also the child's space as well. It's also there for whatever their other passions are and what they enjoy. It doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong, whether it's math to, a different sport. There is no right or wrong, and that's so important to be conscious of. It's purely a discussion around balancing. Everyone's familiar with the work-life balance now. So if we look at the sport of choice as our work, and I think no athlete, especially within that 10 to 20-year-old age bracket, will ever refer to it as work. And hopefully throughout their 20s, not too much either. Though it's really differentiating that there is let's say, that work on one side and life. So what else is there in their life that they love and thrive in and enjoy, and to make time for that, make space for that. And in that way, when we're looking at our identity, it's balanced, and we are preparing that 12, 13, 14-year-old for that balanced approach, the 20-year-old for that balanced approach. And if you're that 29-year-old, that 33-year-old, irrespective of what age you are at, and if you are only learning this now, it's okay. It's never too late. The sooner you become more conscious of, the term around balance and that identification matrix, and where you fall within the sporting spectrum and also outside the sporting spectrum, that's okay. There are two sides to it. There is more to any individual, any human, any player athlete than their sport of choice. And if that's the takeaway that you can really run home with today, that's incredible. And for the parents and coaches out there, please have these conversations with your players or athletes at some point in time. The earlier the better, to make time for, to make space for the other than their sport of choice. The other. If you are that player athlete, I get it. You absolutely love your sport. I get it. Both hands up. I get it 100%. But you know what? There are other things that I know you enjoy too. Whether it's, surfing, it's just, playing with your friends, playing with your mates, irrespective, whatever it is, I know there are other things out there that you do enjoy. It could be reading those favorite books, whether it's a comic or a textbook, it doesn't matter. Make the time. Give yourself that space to enjoy the other. And if you're enjoying the other and your sport of choice, not only are you implementing optimal performance practices in your sport of choice and the other, you are empowering that balanced approach and on your way towards that top 10 ranking. Thank you so much for listening today. We got carried away, I think, in the best possible way. I'm sure you could tell it's something I'm so passionate about, also because of my lived experience that I've been there. And I think that's what's so rewarding to be in this type of position, is that there is such a high chance that I've been where you've been, whether it's as that coach, that athlete, the player, that I get it. And that is where all the work has evolved around, and why I think the secrets to optimal performance success is so empowering, but also why AM8 International was built to not only, I guess, deliver those resources, but essentially hold your hand towards that top 10 ranking, because it really is that 10-year pathway. So we're with you each step of the way, and it's not just as simple as here's one key, here's the 7th key, there you go, see you later. No, it obviously is a progression, and it takes time, and these little intricacies, they're actually huge. They really make those big key differences, even though on the outside they seem so simple and small. They really have, I think, very profound impacts later on in life, and also towards that, year 8, 9, 10 years of that pathway, it really starts telling the tale. If you want to get a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, head on over to AM8 International. That is am8international.com. For any comments, questions, please leave them there as well. Or head to Topic Thread. That is topicthread.com. It's the only social network that I am on. For something a little bit different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That's actually where my fictional release is. I will leave all the links in the episode notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share. That would be wonderful. Like, follow, subscribe, any or all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal, because you know what, at the end of the day, we're really trying to minimize the level of injuries within, I guess, aspiring professional players, irrespective of what level you are at, but also doing our best here to share that we know what it takes to develop a top 10 ranking, and we can get you there. And you know what? If you want to get that top 10 ranking, there's nothing more rewarding than getting another player on board that wants to develop the same outcome, because you know what? That's what builds a team, and that's essentially is really what it's all about, empowering one another and going through that long game together. Okay, I will leave you guys on that. I've had fun. I really hope you've had fun too. Thank you for listening. I am so grateful. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge. This is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.